daily figures. Welcome to this IAAP webinar. I'm Dr. Staffan Berg, coordinator for IAAPS and a moderator for this webinar. I'm so glad that you can take time to reflect on what it will take to create peace. How can we actually move the heart of people to goodness, generosity, forgiveness, and peace? The mother of peace, or as say in French, la mère de la paix, Dr. Hakchahan Moon, founder of IAAP and UPF, has an amazing ability to foster peace among very diverse people. And we have presentations from that were recorded at a recent peace summit less than a month ago on May 4th, 2023 in Seoul, Republic of Korea. And we're going to run those tapes here. And afterwards, the moderator at that Seoul webinar seminar, the international co-coordinator for IAAP, Dr. Thomas Selover, will be adding some comments and function as a resource for questions that you are free to type in the chat. So I'm glad you're here. Our first presenter is His Excellency Dr. Nerves Sekwila Mumba from Zambia. He's a founder of Victory Ministries International, Vice President of Zambia 2003-2004. He's the current leader of the Movement for Multi-Party Democracy, MMD, in Zambia. And this distinguished gentleman is going to present the presentation called Contemporary Challenges to Global Order Toward a World Culture of Peace. Dr. Mumba.
Thank you so much. And I would like to take this opportunity to thank the conveners of this great summit, and also to thank you for the invitation to address this extremely important gathering. So I bring you greetings from my country, Zambia, and we also bring a message to congratulate and wish the founding Dr. Hakchahan Moon a wonderful 80th birthday. Today, Your Excellencies, we are witnessing one of the greatest shifts in global order for the human race. The new global order presents multiple challenges to the life of humanity as we have known it. One of those challenges is global peace. We are gathered here today from the four corners of the world in pursuit of global peace. We are indebted to the Reverend and Dr. Moon, who through their relentless work have given us hope that world peace is possible. God's order in a world of diversity. In His wisdom, God created man of different languages, races, and cultures. God created different genders for His own purpose, male and female. But man has used our differences to heighten conflict instead of harmonizing our coexistence. The ongoing war between Russia and Ukraine has created a dangerous platform that threatens global peace. The West and the East are finally pitted against each other, sending the world into a spin of insecurity and fear. The eruption of the Sudan conflict and the rumors of war in different hotspots of the world places a burden of responsibility on those who seek for peace. The UPF stands on a firm platform to lead the way in the pursuit of global peace and equitable justice. I've made this statement because the UPF is doing something that was originally intended by God or bringing in the factor of God into conflict resolution. We consider, as a Christian, Jesus is called the Prince of Peace. And trying to find peace outside God is trying to deal with the problem of thirst to the exclusion of water. And I think that any peace that is going to stand the test of time will be that peace that factors in God in order to sustain that peace. The delay in the realization of world peace lies in the bias-less efforts in those who wish to promote peace. Conflict involves more than one player. It is time that fair arbitrators for peace are supported. There will be no peace until both sides of the Russian-Ukraine war are spoken to equitably. One-sided intervention will only worsen the conflict. Time has come to find unbiased mediators of peace who shall go both to China and Taiwan, to both Russia and Ukraine, to both Rwanda and the DRC Congo, to both Morocco and Western Sahara. We cannot favor one side above the other when we seek to bring peace. The UPF founders, the Reverend and Dr. Moon, understood this concept of building a culture of peace. In their efforts to bring peace to the Korean Peninsula, they respectedly engaged both the North and the South. They understood that it takes two to tango. Time has come for peacemakers to learn to cross the bridge of personal and isolated interests. The global war machine has turned into a movement, a multi-billion-dollar movement. This movement threatens any opportunity to build a culture of peace. In order to counter this movement of war, we must turn our efforts of peace building into a movement which must start on every continent, a movement which shall bring and spread the culture of peace. My continent, Africa, laden with unmatched natural resources, has now become the battleground for the giants from the West and the East. A vicious fight for the control of the natural resources. This ongoing fight has continued to plunge the continent into a spin of continuous conflict. Africa has therefore decided to take the corner towards peace. The peace movement must have a strong presence in every African nation and within the walls of the African Union Chamber. Africa, out of necessity, must now unite and ensure that the West and the East do not continue to use it as a battleground. African nations must relate to the West and the East, not as a bloc or blocks, but on bilateral basis based on individual national interests of African states. We are, however, of the opinion that although the conflicts created by outside forces are a menace to peace and stability of African states, the most lethal conflicts are those created within individual states. Our goal, therefore, should be to monitor and address the intra-conflicts as they emerge and take preemptive measures to forestall such impending conflicts. It is at this point that the role and place of NGOs like the Universal Peace Federation become all important and necessary. The UPF, with its rich history of promoting peace, stands out as a go-to organization by both states and civil society to seek peaceful ways to resolve national internal conflicts. Most conflicts in Africa, as a result of the fight for natural resources and the political power to control those resources. In countries as greatly resourced as the DR Congo, the foreign element in conflicts is heightened. It is in the interest of the foreign predator to destabilize a rich, resourced nation in order to continue plundering its wealth. Internally, the politicians viciously fight for political power with one goal only: to control the natural resources and share it with their tribesmen and appease foreign powers that help them to acquire that power. Elections have become some of the most divisive exercises in Africa. Electoral commissions, which are not fair, continue to create unending conflicts in most African countries. UPF can play a leading role in resolving such conflicts by upping their preemptive peace summits, preferably 6 months before each election. My country, Zambia, on the other hand, has demonstrated in the past 58 years of independence that peaceful transition of power is possible in Africa. Zambia has had 4 major transfers of power, led by 4 different political parties with no shedding of blood. Zambia, therefore, qualifies to be a case study on the continent in the peaceful transfer of political power. I wish to recommend again that the UPF considers opening a peace research center in Zambia to compile good practices that can be shared with the rest of the continent. Outside the condemned and almost failing military coups in Africa, compromised electoral commissions have become the greatest threat to peace and security on the continent, and the sooner we address this threat, the better for peace. I speak from a point of personal experience, having contested the position of president 3 times. We must all work together to mitigate this security risk. The regional UPF peace summits are poised to play a pivotal role in bringing peace to the African continent. These summits must be inclusive by nature. All warring parties must feel comfortable in the manner these peace summits are organized. It is worth noting that the biggest challenge in most African nations is that of trust. Most international organizations and election monitors are not impartial. So the ultimate goal of the UPF is to win the trust of warring forces in conflict nations. As former Vice President of my country, Zambia, and one of the long-serving church leaders, I have continued to offer my services to the cause of peace, both in Africa and beyond. I further wish to encourage brothers and sisters who have had the privilege to serve their nations in these high positions to put our experiences and resources together to help Africa and the world to come out of this whirlpool of conflict, injustice, and poverty. Together we can. I thank you.
Thank you very much. That was very wonderful. I'm sorry that Dr. Mumba is not live in the audience, and I apologize for the video quality. Myself, I was a little bit spotty, so I hope you heard better than me. Yet we have another recording coming here from another person from another part of the world. As you saw on the flyer, Dr. Mohammad Al Habach, Associate Professor of Islamic and Arabic Studies in Abu Dhabi University, UAE, United Arab Emirates, and past Professor of Religious Studies at Damascus University in Syria. He was a member of the Syrian Parliament between 2003 and 2012, and a member of the Presiding Council also 2003 to 2008. His PhD is in interfaith studies. He published over 50 books in his field. And he's a consultant at the Doha International Center for Interfaith Dialogue out of Qatar and ambassador for peace. His topic is toward a real peace in the Middle East. No one has a right to force people to war. So now for Dr. Habach's challenging presentation. And if you have any questions, be sure to type them in the chat so we can address them after the presentations here. Thank you so much. I would say, Dr. Habach.
Assalamu alaikum. Peace be upon you. Thank you, Dr. Thomas, for this introduction. I hope, inshallah, to give my speech and to give some new information toward a real peace in the Middle East. No one has a right to force people to war. At the beginning, let me explain the situation of religion in Middle East. Religion in everywhere around the world, you can consider the religion as a culture. You like this culture, you can move to other one, you can move to other one, you can get more than one culture or one religion. But in Middle East, the situation is so different. The situation is so different, you have to follow only one way, and you have to understand that religion is in Middle East exactly as identity for everyone, not as just a culture, but as identity, as history, as a historical understanding and historical following. Because of that, we believe in the Middle East that all religions came from this area. All prophets came from Syria, Palestine, Egypt, Lebanon, and Jordan, and Saudi Arabia. This area, without any, if we spoke frankly, most of 60% of the inhabitants of all the planet, all the people around the world, 60% belongs to prophets of Middle East. Muhammad, Jesus, Moses, Abraham, this is all Muslims, Christianity, Jews, Sabians, a lot of religions belongs to this area. So I can see here that religion is seen in the Middle East as a part of the national and cultural identity of most of the countries in the Middle East. Christians also share the same feeling in the countries of the Levant, Syria, Palestine, Lebanon, and Jordan, considering that this land is a historical cradle of Christianity, and in it Christ was born, lived, and preached. Jewish also believe so. Abraham, Ishaq, Yaqub, David, Solomon, and the historical future of the Jewish religion in Palestine too, while the world views religion as a culture. To Mecca or to Jerusalem, and without exaggeration, Christians and Muslims in America, Europe, Australia, Asia, and Africa, anywhere around the world, they cannot find their prey without a spiritual atmosphere came from this area. I hope this beginning will be useful to clarify the role of religion in peace in the Middle East and North Africa region. But does religion really offer peace to this region? Unfortunately, we have to admit that the current situation does not encourage this vision. In our region, there are wars that have not stopped for 100 years. Unfortunately, the religious meaning is present behind this war. Whether they are between Arab and Israel, between Sunnah and Shia, between fundamentalism and secularism, this is what makes it more complicated situation. We try to understand the situation before. We can see that religions as a main value, as a main target is peace, love, mercy, everywhere. But unfortunately, there is some occur in these, exactly with religious leaders who believe that we have a right to force others or to lead others to arrive to salvation. The idea of monopoly of salvation in the Middle East, it's very strong one. And with monopoly of salvation, that means I have a responsibility to lead you, willingly or unwillingly, to good right and to good way and to good straight. Even religions call for peace. Holy texts call for peace. Holy prophets call for peace. But unfortunately, there is, during history, misinterpretation of holy texts. God revealed to Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, "O people, we created you from a male and a female and made you into nations and tribes so that you may know one another, not to each other, not to fight each other." There are multiple currents in Islam, as in case in all religions. Some liberal, some conservative, some strict, and some tolerant. It's no secret that we at the center of human fraternity studies belongs to the tolerant stream that strongly believes in brotherhood between religions. In very clear verse in the Holy Quran, God says, "O you who believe, enter into peace completely. Enter into peace completely." That means Quran said to Prophet Muhammad. More than this, Quran says, "And do not say to one who gives you a peace, you are not a believer." He made the difference between the believer and the unbeliever. The greeting of peace, so when you raise your hand in the greeting of peace, you are a Muslim. And the difference between Islam and disbelief is the difference between peace and war. Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, said, "Whoever has the following three morals has faith in his heart. Be just with yourself, be generous, even you are poor, spread peace in the world." This is the recommendation of Prophet Muhammad. We in Islamic Studies Center, we try to understand the main reason behind the conflicts in the Middle East, to find what exactly the roots of war in our area. What exactly the main root of our role in Syria, and we are looking for that. We try to find this situation to understand what the main reason lead youth people to violence or to war. We found this result. 15% believe that the hatred culture, the main reason behind the war. 45% the injustice situation in the Middle East, the main reason of the war. 5% foreign countries' interference. 12% economic needs. Poverty includes hunger, homelessness situation. This is the main reason of the war. 23% conscription, forcing people to war through compulsory military. Let us study exactly 2 points of the 5. 2 points exactly. The first is misinterpretation of holy texts. The second is conscription, when the dictatorship leads people compulsory to war by the conscription. With regard to the first point, we believe that the texts of religion came for love and mercy, but the misinterpretation of the religious text made the text supporting the war that exists in Islam and other religions, that existed in Islam and other religions. The solution, in fact, is to support the wise interpretation of the religious text in the face of the extremist interpretation, and to confirm that all texts of violence came in self-defense. This is explained by the noble verse in the Holy Quran, وَقَاتِلُوا فِي سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ الَّذِينَ يُقَاتِلُونَكُمْ وَلَا تَعْتَدُوا. Fight those who fight you only, and do not transgress. Not only in Islam, but the religious texts in the Old and the New Testament used to push hundreds of thousands of warriors from Europe to attack the Islamic East under the title of Crusaders, under the title Defense of God. We found hundreds of thousands who came from Europe to defense, under the title of Defense of God. But this matter has completely changed today, as a different interpretation of these texts has been adopted, and they no longer a threat to peace. Let me go to the second one. The second one is, as for the second point, its main reason is the compulsory military. The compulsory military recruitment imposed by the force of law in the Middle East, which gives dictatorship the right to force people to fight in the wars that the dictator wants. The details of the role of religion in peace building are many, but I would like to force on one point of contribution to the peace building, which is the human right to rebel against war, to refuse war. You have a right to rebel against war, to rebel against war, to refuse war. Even you are in the regular army, you have a right to say no for war. I don't recognize a war. I have a right to refuse a war. It's one of the most important human rights that I have presented in dozens of conferences, and I have sent in special studies to the United Nations. It's on originally agreed option. I hope this will take care by the Human Rights Association. Human Rights Declaration is good one, good declaration, and we can find in a Human Rights Declaration that good situation to make all humanity to accept peace and to refuse war. But we have to be frank. We need some correct in this declaration after maybe like 80 years. We need to be clear that the human has a right to refuse a war, even he was in regular army. For example, Muhammad Ali Clay, the boxer man, the hero of war, when he refused to follow American army in Vietnam, he refused to fight. Even so, the law in the United States put him at home and put him at a prison and get his declaration from him and put him in the prison. Why? Because he refused the war. But now we believe there is a lot of development in this point. In the Middle East, the best way to stop war, to isolate this right from the dictatorship. Dictatorship now, day by day, has a river of people by compulsory army, they have a right to push people to war, from this war to this war against its people, war against other countries, war against in same country. That didn't stop at all. Why? Because we didn't do suitable answer for this problem, for this situation. I believe time is enough. I have no time, but we can continue. You can read all the speech there. But let me be clear that I'm looking for 2 points exactly. To re-understanding our holy text and to stop compulsory of military or by this situation. We can stop the war in the Middle East by that. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Habach.
Yes, thank you very much. That was wonderful. Please write your comments in the chat here. We have some coming in, but they're mostly directed messages. But don't hesitate. They're quite challenging comments. Challenging ideas here, radical ideas. And dear participants, we have now our commentator, official commentator is the person you in the middle of that video, in the middle of the panel up there on stage, Dr. Thomas Selover. He has been the president of Sunghak UP Graduate University 2017 to 2022 in the middle of Seoul, and is currently the president of the Professors World Peace Academy International. He's got his doctorate comparative religion and Confucianism from Harvard University and been teaching at many institutions of higher learning in Canada, US, China, and Korea. And I have to say that it was such a pleasure to see him on stage there in Korea, and even more a pleasure to see him here live with us. Dr. Selover, we are keen to hear what you have to say about these presentations that you have heard at 2, 3, 4, 5, I don't know, many times. So share with us your wisdom. Thank you.
No, thank you very much, Staffan. And I'm very happy to have an opportunity to share with all who are gathered here, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for being here, and thank you for your interest in this topic of the role of religion with respect to peace building and peace thought. One of the principles of UPF's summit process is that by convening thought leaders from many parts of the world who represent different perspectives and different historical experiences, by bringing them together, then the real possibility of forward development in peace building will be advanced. And so in this context, the presentations that were given by Dr. Mumba and Dr. Habach offer insights that contribute to the shareable repertoire of peace-building principles and strategies, particularly with regard to the role of religion in peace building. Let me turn first to the contribution of Dr. Mumba. Dr. Mumba is famous in Zambia for proclaiming that Zambia shall be saved. As a Christian evangelist and church leader, he emphasizes that the same God who saves people from their sins will also save the nation of Zambia. The gospel about overcoming sin on the individual level through repentance, forgiveness, and empowerment for change is likened to the gospel of salvation for the nation, redemption through overcoming the problems and collective sins of strife, injustice, corruption, and violence. Dr. Mumba himself, as both a former vice president and leader of government, and as a religious leader, embodies this conscientious conjunction of these two primary spheres of activity, which can support an active and positive role for a religious vision in developing a peace-building way of thinking and acting. He carries deep religious and spiritual motivation and also experience in the ins and outs and the practice of good governance. Dr. Mumba focuses his observations on the point that it is time for fair arbiters for peace to be supported. Right? In other words, this is what we're looking for to advance the peace process. In this regard, Dr. Mumba gives great credit to the UPF founders, Reverend Sun Myung Moon and Dr. Hak Ja Han Moon. He affirms that they understood this concept of building a culture of peace. In their efforts to bring peace to the Korean Peninsula, he says, they respectably engaged both the North and the South, both sides. Now, I would like to comment that Reverend Sun Myung Moon was well known as a fierce critic of North Korea's materialist Juche ideology. And yet, at the end of the day, Dr. Mumba is right. The personal summit of Reverend Moon and Dr. Hak Ja Han Moon with Chairman Kim Il-sung in 1991 was conducted with great diplomatic skill. That personal summit represents a breakthrough of track 2 diplomacy and a cornerstone for peaceful reconciliation on the Korean Peninsula. In fact, when South Korea takes that breakthrough as seriously as the North has done, then we will see substantial progress on the Korean Peninsula. Dr. Mumba notes that powerful nations of the East and the West have been vying for influence and control on the African continent. And yet, he further remarks, and I'll quote, "We are, however, of the opinion that although the conflicts created by outside forces are a menace to peace and stability for the African states, conflicts are those created within individual states. Our goal, therefore, should be to monitor and address the intra-conflicts as they emerge and take preemptive measures to forestall such impending conflicts." Going further, he highlights the potential of UPF. He says, "It is at this point that the role and place of NGOs like the Universal Peace Federation become all important and necessary. The UPF, with its rich history of promoting peace, stands out as a go-to organization by both states and civil society to seek peaceful ways to resolve national and internal conflicts." Dr. Mumba is calling upon UPF to be an equitable
More
broker,
money I'm spending.
In situations of conflict. I would like to respond to Dr. Mumba based on the concept of mutual prosperity in relationship to good governance and in relationship to its grounding in a religious and spiritual vision. So mutual prosperity is one of UPF's key ideas. Worldwide, UPF promotes an approach to the political order characterized by mutual prosperity or mutual flourishing. Now, I want to point out that this mutual prosperity is more than a simple political bargain between two sides. It's not a so-called win-win approach, which can easily degenerate into collusion. You scratch my back and I'll scratch yours. That's not what we're talking about here. Instead, mutual prosperity envisions a win-win-win situation, a dynamic which always honors and takes into account the whole of the situation and the whole benign, inclusive purpose of heaven's providence. Win-win-win. Moreover, mutual prosperity in a political sense, based on the model of a family of brothers and sisters and elders and youngers, can serve as a foundation for reconciliation between political parties. Rather than a clash of partisans or interest groups, Good governance has to be built on a model of human relatedness, which is based on familial bonds of love and care for all concerned. Dr. Mumba points out that elections have become some of the most divisive exercises in Africa. He wants to see UPF play a leading role in resolving such conflicts by upping their preemptive peace summits, preferably 6 months before elections. If you take the whole continent of Africa, UPF would be quite busy to keep up with the schedule of elections. We may ask, can UPF actually become such an equitable broker? Dr. Mumba points the direction. It is worth noting that the biggest challenge in most African nations, he says, is that of trust. Most international organizations and election monitors are not impartial. So the ultimate goal of UPF is to win the trust of the warring forces in conflict nations. So how can UPF have the wisdom and the stamina to do that? Indeed, UPF, if it has that capacity to become an equitable broker for elections in Africa, it will be because of the underlying peace philosophy of UPF, built on a family model with spiritual and religious underpinnings. It must be based firmly on a vision and approach of one family under God, guided by the Mother of Peace. Now I'd like to turn to Dr. Habach's presentation. Dr. Habach addresses the issue of religion directly throughout his presentation. He begins by noting the centrality of religious identity, particularly in the Middle East. As he puts it, while the world views religion as a culture, the Middle East considers religion to be its most important historical treasure and the most important reason for spreading out in the world, spiritually and socially. So religion is centrally important, but does religion really offer peace? Looking at the Middle East today, it certainly doesn't seem so. However, Dr. Habach advises us, in order not to be frustrated and hopeless, we need a broader perspective. If we look back in history, we find similar periods of conflict in Europe. That is, between Europe and the Islamic world, and also within Europe between Catholics and Protestants. But today, that dangerous disease, he calls it, is now fully defeated, and Europe's mosques and churches are once again centers of love and peace. So in the long run, there's hope. But how do we get there faster? At the heart of his presentation, Dr. Habach lists two main causes of war in the Middle East: misinterpretation of the texts of religion and forcing people to war through conscription. With regard to the first point, Dr. Habach argues eloquently for a deliberate, peace-affirmative hermeneutic by which to interpret religious texts that seem to promote violence. He tells us, "We believe that the texts of religion came with love, and that the misinterpretation of the religious text is what made the texts put them in the service of war." He goes on to say, "The solution, in fact, is to support the wise interpretation, meaning the peaceful interpretation of religious texts in the face of any extremist interpretations, and to confirm that all texts that talk about violence came for the purpose of self-defense." This peace-affirmative interpretation can be applied not only to Islamic sacred texts, but also to the Old and New Testaments as well. Probably most of us would agree with Dr. Habach on this point, that the peace-affirmative understanding of religious texts should be our focus, and it's something that we can appreciate also about the religious texts of others. His second main point about forced conscription and a sacred human right not to participate in war is directly confronting a major issue of universal values and personal conscience. Dr. Habach asks, what if the warrior has the right to rebel against an unjust war? This is his answer to the question of who decides whether a war is just or not. His answer is it's the warrior, the person who is the real stakeholder in the decision, the fighter who pays the price for the war with his or her life. It has to be the soldier's decision. He should never be dragged into a war that he never believed in. As envisioned by Dr. Habach, the beneficial result of recognizing conscientious objection as a sacred right, the right to rebel against an unjust war, would be that the dictators would have to recognize that opposing war is a human right. And so they'll have to reorganize their calculations and find a way to protect the country without resorting to war. Dr. Habach's suggestion is more radical than the extremists because his proposal goes to the root of war making and peace building. In upholding conscience, even to the point of the right to rebel against war, Dr. Habach is proposing a humanitarian vision of a higher calling leading all of us beyond war. We can see then how Dr. Habach's two main recommendations are connected to each other. He has already reminded us of the importance of religious identity in the Middle East, so now he resets the religious and moral justification for war by advocating the hermeneutics of peace in interpreting sacred religious texts. This is the work of religious leaders and scholars, but it's also the work of religious communities generally. Once the religious motivation or obligation to go to war has been properly defused, it's then possible to address conscientious objection and what to do about it. In responding to Dr. Habach's two main points, I'd like to call upon the UPF concept of universal shared values, which can also be interpreted as co-righteousness, shared righteousness, which leads us directly to the question about conscience. First, we would need to call upon each side to deepen their consciousness of their own conscience. Then second, we would need to uphold the recognition of conscience on both sides or all sides. This is particularly important when some feel a strong conscientious objection to war, while others feel an equally strong moral duty to fight. We would reason together, thirdly, toward a deliberate decision to advance the way of enhancing peace through these different conscientious commitments. There is indeed much more to say, but I must come to a close. Thank you for allowing me to offer these reflections on two excellent presentations. In closing, I would like to highlight two sets of questions for our further discussion. First, how could UPF become an equitable broker in Africa or elsewhere in the world? What would need to be the internal mechanisms of decision-making that would enable UPF to successfully play that role? What would be the role of the several UPF pillar associations, including IAAP, in contributing to such a role? Related to that, how can the principles upheld by UPF, specifically mutual prosperity, provide guidelines and help facilitate that equitable broker role? Then Dr. Habach asks, when will we ever produce an appropriate mechanism that makes the refusal to participate in a war a sacred human right? In this light, can the UPF concept of shared universal values help to make room for conscientious objection against war, since many religious and moral communities support such conscientious objection? What can UPF and its affiliates do to help promote conscientious discussion of the moral issues on all sides of the issue of conscientious objection? With these questions, let me conclude. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Selover, for those comments. Erudite, and you post your own questions here to the audience. I would encourage you all who are listening, if you have any feedback on the challenge, the gauntlet that Dr. Selover threw down, can we actually become that peace broker or peace partner, and how should we deal with the conscience? How should we do that? I look forward to see your questions pop up in the chat, but before that, I just want to say I really resonate with this. I was conscripted to the Swedish army many years ago, and I had a quandary. Because my mom told me not that I should be a nice person, not kill people, but I had to learn to kill people. I liked that. It didn't sit with me. So I understand this. But my wife has an even more substantial point of view, at saying after carrying a baby in the womb for 9 months, through so much pain and heartache and challenges, how can we allow our children to kill our children? How can we do that? It's a substantial reality for her, and I think for other mothers too. Not just kind of, as for men, a little bit more conscientious or spiritual, but for women, it's really substantial pain. So anyway, I resonate with that. I appreciate your comments, Dr. Selover. And I look forward to volunteers. Are you thinking about these things? I'm sure you have, as you are on this call. I am looking for them questions. I have another person who has a lot of experience in the work of creating peace here. And he's none other than the president of UPF International and the chairman of UPF here in the United States. I know that some of you people might join from overseas, yet we'd like to hear a few words here from Dr. Jenkins, who was in Korea and has been part of this program of creating peace for decades now. So if you have some comments to offer, Dr. Jenkins, we'd love to hear from you.
Thank you, Dr. Staffan Berg, and thank you to Dr. Selover for your excellent presentation. And our speakers today are dear friends. Vice President Nevers Mumba has been a very strong friend and support for UPF for many years, and also a diplomat and a pastor. And also Dr. Habach has an amazing background. His wife is, as you know, the daughter of one of the most well-known and renowned Muslim leaders in the world, Sheikh Kuftaro of Syria. And Sheikh Kuftaro was the one that picked 40 people from the Muslim world to go under his direction to New York and meet with our founders, Reverend and Mrs. Moon, and also to study for 40 days our teachings on peace, our teachings on interfaith, and what we call the divine principle. So Dr. Habach has been such a godsend in so many ways in our work with the Middle East Peace Initiative, and also with the work of bringing faiths together for peace. So I'm really grateful for this program. I'm very grateful for our summit. We had the Peace Summit 2023. It was a huge step forward. And Dr. Selover, thanks for your summary, but also for your sharing also our universal values that need to be really broken down and developed. Interdependence, mutual prosperity, and universal values. These three pillars are very, very important. I'm fascinated by the International Association of Academicians for Peace. Dr. Berg, I'm so glad you're partnering with Dr. Selover, who is the global chair of the Professors World Peace Academy. And it really is an amazing experience for me. We have associations of parliamentarians. We have association of religious leaders. We have association of heads of state. But the one association that really can touch every country when it comes to reunification of North and South Korea is the Foundation of Scholars. Of course, religious leaders from all over the world can be engaged. Of course, heads of state are concerned about peace between in Northeast Asia and the ramifications for the Western world. But I found that the parliamentarians, for the most part, unless they're really involved with Korea, they really don't have much engagement there. Also, we found countries like America are very, very easy to find parliamentarians that are engaged because it directly relates with America. But scholars, on the other hand, whether it's a scholar from African universities or Eastern Europe, doesn't matter. There's scholars in almost every university on Asian studies and also on the situation of the challenge of going on in Northeast Asia, the challenges with Russia and China and other nations that have been involved and rooted in some of the socialist or materialist philosophies. So I think IAAP of scholars can open up to any topic in any area. So I really want to thank you for this participation, Dr. Selover, because I think it really means a lot when you're here and questioning how can UPF really be the mediator that many say it could be. I have a lot of hope in that direction, but I do think we need to learn from others. How can we stand in mediation more effectively? I went to the Middle East 46 times to Palestine and Israel with different organizations, and I saw what it meant to be really a real partner that could be trusted by all sides. That's not an easy thing to do, but you can't be endorsing one side and not endorsing the goodness in the other side. So it's like, that's why if you take sides in a conflict, you end up alienating the other side. But there are common ground, and that's where I think our three pillars of ideology come about. So I want to thank you for this program today. And I really am encouraged, Staffan, by the work you're doing. Thank you again, Dr. Selover, and to our audience. We can bring peace, and we have seen it in many, many situations when there's honoring the creator as the guideline for peace and the creator of all of our fundamentals, principles come from God, and our fundamental freedoms also come from God, our fundamental rights. When we can get in touch with that, which is that divine nature in every person, even if they're in a world of denying God, they can change to see the idea that there is a universal value and there is an intelligence behind our life and our purpose, and especially the intelligence of having a family is the most beautiful thing. Thank you, everybody. Thank you to UPF and our team here.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Dr. Jenkins, Dr. Selover, and digitally, remotely, our speakers who were recorded, and all of you who were on this program. I thank you very much for your participation, and do not hesitate to offer your insight and your sweat equity for peace. I know you already, by being on here, you are. So thank you. If you have any other ideas, give me a call. Thank you so much, and God bless you. Have a wonderful Tuesday, and see you next week with a new installment of Washington Briefs coming up, and we'll see more a political view of reality on the diplomatic level. So diplomacy is to create peace, so create action. So look forward to see you then. Thank you very much for logging on today. God bless you all.
Okay.
Thank you. God bless you all.
Wonderful
Also.
conversation.
Great program.
Very insightful. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Selover. Great
Thank you,
program.
thank you. Excellent program.
Thank you, Dr. Selover.
Great program.
Thank
Wow.
you. Thank you.
Well,
Wonderful.
thank you. We're on
Thank
the way.
you to all the presenters for their insightful presentation.
Mm.
Absolutely.